So welcome everybody, come on in. I'm glad to have you all here. This is the Product Expert Fireside series that we run here at ProdPad. And today we are joined by Dave Martin, who we're going to introduce properly soon. He's going to be talking about his book, The Product Momentum Gap, and probably a series of other things as well, because we always take these things off piste. As with the series of webinars, we always have a focus on the experts that we bringing in their excellent insights from their mix of experiences. Today is going to be a focus on the content and learning and sharing. Today is going to be recorded, so you will get a copy of this that you can keep for yourself or share around with your colleagues. You will have a chance to ask questions. You will have a chance to use the chat, so make use of all that. Get in there and introduce yourself now if you haven't already. We have a bunch of past talks that have been recorded as well. So this is the last one of the year, but we've been doing them every month throughout this year, as well as past years. So there's dozens of these, and there's a mixture of presentations from product experts, as well as firesides, like we're doing today. Before I kick off and introduce Dave, I want to just tell you a little bit about ProdPad, the tool that we build here. ProdPad was built by myself and my co-founder, Simon Cast, when we were product managers ourselves. We just needed something to help keep track of our big, chaotic backlog of ideas and experiments and customer feedback, and something to help us take care of our roadmaps that everyone is asking to see. And nothing existed, so we started building it. And so what we realized was that ProdPad was this tool that would help give us control and organization over our product management processes and gave people transparency into the product management process. And it creates this single source of truth for all those product decisions. So we started sharing it with other product people, and now it's used by thousands of product teams around the world. It's a tool that you can try for free. We've got a free trial as well as a sandbox version of ProdPad. And what this sandbox version is preloaded with example data. So you can see how now, next, later roadmaps and OKRs and experiments and ideas and feedback all fit together in a product management space. So you can try it out for yourself, move things around, and see how it works for you. And our team is made up of product people. It was founded by a couple of product people. You might notice there's a couple of the founders behind Mind the Product. And we've also hired and surrounded ourselves with product people. So whenever you get a chance to chat to us, let us know how you're getting on with your trial. Let us know how you're getting on with your account. I know that there's a lot of good ProdPad users in our audience here. So say hi. Thanks for all your support. And for anybody new to it, jump in, give it a try. We'd love to get your feedback. We're product people ourselves, so we're constantly learning and iterating from your feedback. I want to give a little shout out to something that our team has built recently, which is a tool to help you clear that chaos that you have in your existing product backlog. How many of you have a big, messy Jira already? This is one of the biggest problems that we come across that people have. They've got this Jira that's just been stuffed full of tickets. So what we have is this ability to connect to your Jira and then import that mess. And then once it's in ProdPad, we have an AI assistant that will help you clean it up, will help you figure out what's what in there, help you deduplicate, merge stuff, figure out what you need to archive, figure out what needs to be pushed onto development to actually be built, what needs to be put on the roadmap, what needs to sit aside for a little while. You can use AI to check alignment with your product vision. Some of those things are going to just be like little one-liners that aren't ready yet. So you can use AI to generate specs. And you can also use ProdPad to visualize your whole backlog in one space to say, which of these things are actually impactful? Which of these things are quick wins? Which of them are time sinks? And so you can use ProdPad to make sense of your product backlog that you've imported from Jira so that you're basically clearing that chaos. We've done a demo video of it, so check out that link at the bottom, prodpad.com/clear-the-chaos. That's a bit of a mouthful, isn't it? But check it out, or just jump into ProdPad and give it a try. You just need to hook up the Jira integration, which is a few clicks, and you can import it yourself. Claudia just sent a note. She posted this just to host some panelists, but she said, tried it this week. It's so amazing from the product perspective. Thank you for that note, Claudia. Really appreciate that. So on that note, I want to move on to our product expert for the day and start chatting about the actual subject. Today, we're going to be talking to Dave Martin. And now, Dave and I go way back. I actually used to work with Dave at a previous startup when I was a head of product. And Dave, you were the director of product, I believe.
Some title like that. I
Yeah,
can't
some
remember.
title. It was one of those chaotic startups where titles didn't matter, but we were in there, sleeves rolled up and getting stuff done. But I learned a ton from Dave. This is early on in my career when I was still figuring out what good product management looked like. And I credit a lot of my learning from Dave and looking up to him. He was also a great shit umbrella, right? Really good at managing the execs and managing the different stakeholders, and taught me a thing or two about how to empathize with different stakeholders, not just the users. I came from a user point of view, but he'd actually come from a business point of view and had a more well-rounded experience. So I learned a lot from him in that period. And so today, he's a seasoned leader in the world of product management. He's got a passion and lots of experience in transforming teams. He empowers leaders to break free from the shackles of order taking and stakeholder battles. And I know he does this because I've seen him do it in person. He's the founder of Right to Left. And what he does there, he facilitates innovation, he helps with customer satisfaction, helps teams with market growth. He basically enables product teams to solve real problems. So he advises and coaches people on becoming outcome-focused leaders and fostering cultures that allow product teams to flourish. So with that, I want to introduce Dave. There's a lot more that he's done, not least, he's just released a book that he's written with Andrea Says, who worked with us here at ProdPad as well. You might remember her. It's called The Product Momentum Gap. So we're going to be talking a bit about that today, but I want to introduce Dave and say a huge thank you for joining us today. Hi, Dave. Everybody say hi.
Hi, Janna. What a fantastic introduction. Thank you so much.
Of course.
I think the thing that I remember the most working together was this tool you put together on the side to help us do our jobs, which you eventually turned into ProdPad. It's been awesome being part of observing the journey of both yourself and the business over all these years, and it's awesome to be here now. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you, Dave. You were the, I guess you could say, like an alpha user of ProdPad. You used ProdPad before it had a name, before we were willing to, before we had the guts to get it out there, show it to people that we didn't know. And I remember you standing there and saying, you should probably go do something with this. And I'm really glad I took that advice. And I'm sure there's lots of other product people who agree with that.
Oh yeah, fantastic.
And so since that point in time, we've both taken leaps and jumps. You took the leap from being an in-house product manager to being a advisor coach. Tell us about that leap. What led you to that?
Thanks for asking. That's a really interesting question, actually, and it doesn't get asked a lot. My last full-time job was Chief Product Officer at a company called TES. Some of you might know of TES. It used to be called Times Education Supplement. We also own something called THE. So if you've got any relatives who are a teacher, they definitely know what TES is, especially in the UK, because they probably got their first and last teaching job through TES. And we did a lot of different things in that organization, but it was a private equity owned business, and part of my job as a part of the executive team there was I was brought in to transform it from a transactional advertising business into a SaaS business that sold subscription. We did that journey. We built out a product team that didn't exist. When I left, there was a 30, 40 strong product function with marketing and data under the same umbrella. So 150 people worked for me in that business. We did some new things that were a bit different, but at the end of the day, we managed to achieve the goal. We transformed it. We built great software that really changed millions of people's lives all over the world, because it was a global business. Really nice mission-led organization with some amazing people who I'm still in touch with. And that when we sold it, because that was the goal, if you're private equity owned and you're on the exec team, the management team's job is to build the business and sell it. And we successfully sold the company. And when we sold it, I left and had that opportunity to stop and reflect and think about what I really wanted to do. And my role in TES had changed from being, once upon a time a product manager through to being a product leader. And then in TES, while still being a product leader, I've become a leader of leaders. All my staff had VP in front of their title. And for me to succeed, I needed them to be successful leaders in their own right. And I realized when I left that was the bit of the job I started to really enjoy. That was the bit that made me smile. That was the bit that made me want to get out of bed, helping those guys do better. And I'm in touch with all my old VPs, and they're all see something now doing phenomenally. They're amazing. And that was the bit I enjoyed. So I selfishly thought about, well, what job could I do? How can I make a living and just do the bit I enjoy and not do the bits I don't want to do? And selfishly, very selfishly, that was being an advisor and a coach. My favorite work is where I'm coaching other product leaders and founders, helping them be more outcome led, helping them think about being more servient leaders, helping them set their teams up for success and develop great people who are going to do amazing things. Yeah, that's why I'm doing what I do, because that's the bit I enjoy the most.
Excellent. I love that. I love framing your career around figuring out what it is that you actually want to do and then getting rid of the stuff that's otherwise filling up that time. So huge congrats on being able to get to that point. I want to back it up to something that you said there that really sparked some interest, because you said that you were working at TES and you got them to the point that they were transformed, which stands out to me because you hear so many companies going through a transformation, but you don't hear of companies having been transformed, like being at the end of that transformation. So that's actually a really unique point of view to be able to look back on that. How did you know that it was transformed? What are the markers when you can say, we've done enough, it's now at the point that we can step back? Or is it a constant transformation process?
That's awesome. I think it would be foolish, and I think arrogant to suggest that there's not improvement. Every business and every individual can always improve and do better. But we were in a place where our roadmap was mainly driven by outcomes. It wasn't full of features, despite the private equity backers who typically have a different viewpoint. They bought into that as well. So we were from top down focused on the outcome we were creating for the customer. We'd aligned our goals, the business goals. We'd aligned how the business goal, what we expected our customers' value to have to be for their business to achieve our business goals. So what customer value did we have to provide that would map to us getting more ARR? And we've gone that step further to understand what were the users' behaviors that we got to impact in order for those business goals to go up. And I think it's actually in the book as well, quite heavily. We call it the value chain in the book. And when you think about a product function, and I know we don't like to use the F word, but we release features. That's actually what we do. I know we spend a lot of time trying to not talk about features, but that's what we do. And when we release a feature or change one or get rid of one, what's the impact? What's the direct immediate impact? And the direct immediate impact on our customer is some user changes their behavior. And the user and the buyer might be the same people. My life has been mainly in B2B, not always, but mainly. So they're often different people. But the user's behavior changes in some way. They're going to be able to do something quicker, easier, or faster, hopefully. Normally, it's one of those things. We can send things more, email more targetedly. We can schedule quicker. We've got more analytics at our hand to make better decisions faster, whatever it might be. And that's a behavioral change. We've changed the behavior of the user.
Yeah.
That's the direct thing our product does. So if we can articulate our product strategy and our planning around what's the user behaviors we're trying to change or modify in some fashion, we map to those customer values. So these are the behaviors we care about that will help the customer get the value they want. And these are the values that will help us get our business growth. And we work across that sweet spot, where those three things intersect. Then we're having a huge impact on the business. And by being transformed, when I felt like, hey, we've arrived as a product function in TES, was when we were planning around those user behaviors. With the exec team and leadership are all aligned that these were the behaviors product had got to drive. And the teams whilst they all had clear purpose and were focused on clear parts of the journey or clear users and clear value propositions, their OKRs were around those behaviors. They were focused and they had the autonomy to go and work out how to create those behaviors. We weren't dictating, hey, you've got to build feature X. We were dictating, we need this behavior. You work out how the hell you create that. That's your autonomy. You go figure that out. but this is the behavior we've got to see happen from our customers, from our users. So I think that the fact that we got to that point and that behaviors were the focus and the goal for the product function was one sort of serious milestone. I think the other was how tightly coupled we were with marketing and sales, rather than being siloed. We'd reached a place where I created a go-to-market function to help with that sales enablement. We moved it out of product into sales at some point when we were happy that we got the function working. That meant that there was this inherent strong connection between the two departments. And we got, from a marketing standpoint, we put marketing managers in every squad. They tended stand up. They were part of the journey. They understood what the problem was we were trying to solve. And part of helping product managers with that, with some of the research as well, because some of them are amazing researchers, they understood the problem before we'd solved it. So they could already start thinking about the marketing message, because actually the feature didn't matter. The actual technical bit of what the widget was to solve the problem, that didn't really matter to the marketeer. The fact that this was the problem the customer had and we were solving it, that's what really mattered, because no one really buys features. They buy the solution. They buy the better, how it's going to make their life better. So the marketeers were able to, we sped up time to market. We made sure, because there was no delay between the feature being built and then marketing having to work out what the hell it was. And it's meant that we were just more congruent as an organization, because people were involved at the very beginning and were focused on the problems we were solving. And that helped sales as well. The go-to-market piece was all around the problem and consultative. Brought in some great sales consultants who helped with that journey. The sales guys, they did an amazing job. So I think that's where we realized it was all together. Of course, it could improve. Of course, it could be better. But from where it was, we'd arrived.
Yeah, that's really excellent insight. It's also interesting that you called out features as this bad word, right? That product managers don't talk about. So we don't want to be measured by, or we don't want to be known as feature driven. But ultimately, that is the thing that we create, right? We change features, we add features, we take features away. But it's in order to drive change in behaviors or create value for the business. And the way that you turned that on its head was to map out the value that you're looking to create. And that sort of, I'm envisioning this like overlaying into which features or which changes need to be done within the business to achieve those value drivers.
Yeah, that's it. We articulated the product strategy, as we called it, the product value creation plan. And that's actually what it's in the Product Momentum Gap book, is pretty much about that. How do you write your product value creation plan, the VCP? And that's a term I stole from private equity. Our private equity owners wanted a business VCP. So it made complete sense to have a product version of this, a product lens of how we would do it. And when explaining it to VC, PE investors and board members, it was easier to compare it to something they understood and saw a bit more frequently, which was marketing. When we think about our marketing counterparts, we don't expect marketing to create a 12-month campaign plan and have exact detail of what the campaign slogan is going to be and what the words and the advert might be in January, when we want these commitments for the December Christmas campaigns. That would be unheard of. It'd be crazy. And nor would we beat up marketing for changing that and deciding the campaign should be different, or the word, or the change where they're going to place it, their channels, their mix, in order to get a better return on investment. They'd be celebrated for making those changes. But for some reason in product, too many teams managed to try and commit for 12 months exactly what they're going to build, with not clarity on why. And then when they change their mind, they get beaten up for it. And when you explain it that way and say, actually, you ask marketing to commit to leads. Typically in a SaaS business, it's number of leads. In our world, in product, we're going to commit to behaviors. And how we do that will change. We'll tell you how we might do it for the next 3 months, but we don't really know how we're going to do it for the whole year. We just know that these are the behaviors that are meaningful, and they're the ones we're going to change. And that really helped people get it and change people's views. So the VCP, then we had some value indicators that allowed us to just track those behaviors. And they weren't the most accurate tracking, but they're good enough. I mean, if they went up, if they went in the right direction, the behavior was going in the right direction. And that allowed us to also, throughout the year, check strategy. So we could review our product strategy quarterly and look, lead indicators, these behavioral indicators are gone in the right direction. What's happened to all those lag metrics? What's happened to churn? What's happened to acquisition? Which in a business like that can be a 12-month sales cycle. So they're not going to change super fast, but we can see if our metrics are going in the right direction and the lag metrics aren't, either there's a problem somewhere else in the organization or our strategy is wrong, and we can have that healthy conversation.
So you managed to take something that was typically quite undigestible to the execs at a PE company, which is working in this experimentation-led, outcome-focused way, and use language from other divisions, marketing in this case, to make it more digestible for them to get on board with.
Yeah, and use their language. Like I never describe product discovery as product discovery. It's always either risk management or due diligence.
Risk management or due diligence.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's their language. You know,
Yeah.
if you spend all your day making investments, you do discovery work all the time. You just call it something else.
Which makes sense. As product people, our job is to work with different stakeholders and speak their language and understand how to best communicate with them. And we tend to do a great job of that when we're communicating with our teammates at our peer level and communicating with our customers. But we do a terrible job of it in a lot of teams communicating upwards. We try to talk to them about how we're creating customer delight and doing product discovery, and they don't care, it doesn't translate. So terms like due diligence or talking to them about risk management, these are really good golden nuggets that people can use to get their point across.
Yeah, it's just you're right. We're really good at empathizing sideways and downwards, but for some reason we frequently feel like because somebody's above us in hierarchy, we haven't got to empathize with them. You know, that they're in an entitled position, so why should I empathize with that person? Or we feel like we've got to educate them because they're a decision maker and somehow get them on board with the cult of product management. That never works. That's never going to work. You've got to explain it in their language so they understand. And the details of how we do it, often that doesn't need to be fully explained in detail, but the transparency of the data, that's what matters. So we can show, hey, look, we're making these decisions. This is how we're doing it. This is the transparency of the information. So when we thought about that product VCP, we would regularly get a product manager to share to the whole exec, this is the decisions we're making for the next quarter or for this month based on this evidence. And it wouldn't be, this is the product discovery, this is the experiment I ran, despite the fact that's what they were doing. It would be, this is the evidence we've captured, and just boiling it down to a single table that was comprehensible to everybody that could help. You know, this is the data of information, this is the conclusion, this is what we're going to do to make this behavior go up or down, whatever it is. So just about making it simple. It's not really that complicated, to be honest. It's pretty simple. We just perhaps get tangled up in the detail too much.
So Brody asked a good question here. Were there any challenges with adopting it?
Hi, Brody. I think I know Brody. I think I used to coach Brody. So good to see you, Brody. Nice to see you here. Was there any challenges in adopting? Yeah, I mean, there were enormous challenges in that particular organization. Probably best this doesn't become the story of Tez, but we had to change some enormous things. We had to change some mindset things. We had to change business units had to be merged together. In that business of that size, that the centralized product, for example, required some enormous organizational change beyond just product, so that we were all focused on the same problem space. On a more detailed level, I think probably some of the bigger challenges were the normal leadership challenges when there's change. It's easy as a leader to think, hey, this is a better way of doing it, and we've agreed it, so job done. But the reality is everyone's, just like I coach on leadership habits to try and get people to adopt better outcome habits and drive their own personal success further. The people will go back to their default ways, to their old ways really quickly, and they forget why this is a better way. And the real challenge is the same as all change management. It's that continuously banging the drum, explaining why, if you're a leader and you haven't explained the purpose and why so much that it feels like a broken record to you, and I could do this in my sleep on on auto cue, then you aren't doing it enough, because that's the level you've got to do it to get the message across. So it's about the challenge is being consistent and having the resilience to keep repeating the same thing again and again, because it will eventually drive everybody into the right place.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is the value of having shared vocabulary around things and using the words that people look to or that people can get on board with, and creating shared vocabulary like you've created product momentum gap and things like this to help get people around this same concept that they can use amongst their teams to discuss where the problems lie and how to close those gaps, for example.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, in the book, there's probably two main pieces of vocabulary: the product VCP and product value indicators. They're probably the two big things, and they're taken from my time at TES for doing that firsthand. But since then, as a coach, I've helped probably 60 companies put that process in place, those tools in place,
Yeah.
and they're all using them today, as far as I know. Some of them I know the feedback's been phenomenal of the impact it's had company-wide, aligning sales and product together, and so things that surprise people that they weren't expecting. And that's really why we wrote the book. Andrea had been helping me write some blog posts and helping me. I'm dyslexic, so I'm not the best writer. So she was helping me craft those words and get them out and supporting me. And she's got great insight of her own from a product marketing perspective. And we thought, well, hey, there's a lot of content here. Why don't we put it in a book and try and make it more meaningful and get a bigger reach and help more people. My mission for Right to Left, and why I do it, I said it's because it's the bit I enjoy, which is true, but I do have a bigger purpose than just a smile every day. And the bigger purpose is, there's a stat from Pendo which puts the fear of God in me. There's a stat from Pendo that says that 80% of all new features released either are rarely or never used. When you stop and think about that for a second, that really means that product management's failing miserably. If 80% of all new released features aren't being used, that's 80% of all the R&D for product engineering was a complete waste of investment. So from a business standpoint, it's disastrous. From a people standpoint, it's worse. I mean, think of all the pain and blood and sweat and tears and effort that goes into some of that work. And then to think that it doesn't even get used by anybody, what a waste of human effort. So my bigger mission personally is to help us stop that waste and get to a place where it's not 80%. Let's improve that figure. And we should all be, in my opinion, anybody with the title product anywhere in their job title should be attempting to get to a better place with that figure collectively. And writing a book helped get the message broader.
And how are you seeing the best teams keeping track of what's actually being used versus not used?
Interesting, because I see a lot of teams that are not doing it rather than the best.
Are there any best
As
practices?
a
Is anybody
as a
excelling in this
yeah, I
space,
mean,
or is it still an untouched
I get dragged
problem?
in as a coach. I get dragged into the teams that are not doing things so well.
That's true.
But
Yeah, you're gonna have a
and
particular
I have a
bias.
bias, yeah. But I
Yeah.
think of some of the teams I coach. I've Over the last few years, I've coached some product leaders in post-IPO tech firms, or just about to IPO tech firms, places like GitLab and Contentful and Sneak. And some of those teams do this really well. It's really just I think it's down to having firstly the right analytics tooling, whatever that preference might be, the right tools to give you the data. And then secondly, it's about interpreting that data. And the best, I think, are the ones that are able to map that user behavior, that adoption rate, whatever it is, map it to the customer value and really understand where it's having that impact. So I call it in the book, me and Andrea call it value indicators, but other teams will call it different things. It might be their KRs, it might be their KPIs, whatever it is. But it's about users doing stuff. So effectively, it's about adoption metrics of some sort, making that the primary focus, because a product team, apart from some very rare things like an accounting package with an end of year report that you run once a year, apart from the rare things, the majority of effort that product teams build and output they're things that should be used on a regular basis. So we should, if they're not, we're failing, and we've got to
Yeah.
make that the primary focus.
Yeah. Otherwise, why are we spending all this time
Yeah,
building them?
exactly.
Yeah.
Totally. There's one thing I'm certain of, that if you release a feature and no one uses it, you created no value.
Yeah. There was a great talk by Paul Adams, who was at Intercom the time, and he was talking at, this is a talk from Mind the Product Engage in Hamburg some years ago. I can't remember the exact year, but I'll put the link in the transcript when we get it. And he was talking about basically if you launch a feature and no one sees it, did you actually launch a feature? And he was talking about there's all this effort that goes into launching the feature. Post-launch, you've got to make sure that sales is trained on it. You got to make sure the support knows about it. You got to make sure that people are using it. You got to make sure all these things that happen afterwards, which just often don't get touched. It was a very telling take on product management, because we spent the rest of the day talking about what happens beforehand, all the discovery and building up to it.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, the point that, and it depends on the different company which role it fits in, whether it's product manager or some other job title. But the reality is there's got to be process and effort to downstream of the actual technical part of building the feature to make it a success. And from my view, this product should be involved in that. Product management should be involved in that process. They might not own all of it, but they need to be involved in it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, for a start, they wouldn't get feedback, and that's how do we know how we're going to know how to iterate and make it better. But that process of making sure that go-to-market, that sales enablement happens, that business readiness, making sure everybody's aware of it, making sure CS know how to, CS are trained and know about this thing, so they don't look stupid on a phone call, making sure sales understand not just what it is, but why we built it. What was the problem it solved? Not just what does it do and the rudimentary ability to click through it in the demo, but the more important part of why we did this and what the actual problem is. And if that communication isn't coming from product, and it can only come from product, at least at the source, there might be other people involved in a large company to disseminate it. But that information of why we built it, that's your original product discovery that needs to be interpreted for the rest of the company. That if that doesn't get out there, that's when you end up with sales teams selling it for the wrong reason or to the wrong people. And
Yeah.
that's when we end up with high churn, or we end up with those annoying customer requests that come in, especially in B2B software, of I could close this big deal if we had X. And that's because they went and started pitching it to the wrong people. That we never solved, and we weren't trying to solve that problem.
Yeah. So what are some of the common signs that organizations might be facing a product momentum gap? Or maybe put in a slightly different way, who's going to benefit the most from really absorbing and reading this book?
Yeah, cool. There's two parts to the book, really. We describe something called the product momentum gap that we've labeled. I'll share exactly what I mean by that in just a sec. But there's also then the second part of how to articulate strategy and execute product strategy using the product VCP. And everybody can benefit from the second part. It doesn't matter whether you're a young startup. I work with seed startups and they use this technique, and I work with IPO companies and they use this technique. So everybody can benefit from that part. But the first part that describes the product momentum gap, you're not going to experience this if you're a young seed business. You're going to experience this if you're Series A and upwards. And the product momentum gap specifically thinks about that point after you've got your initial traction. When everyone talks about product market fit as the original traction, and we unfortunately talk about it like it's binary, like it's either on or off. Oh, I have product market fit. It's a really odd way of thinking about it. I prefer to think of PMF like a bell curve. People are familiar with a more statistical bell curve, yeah?
It's a good way to think about it, yeah.
If you think of it as a bell curve, strength of fit is the vertical, the y-axis, and along the bottom, the x horizontal, is the market, people in the market, the breadth of the market. So some very narrow niche of the market has the peak of market fit. So let's say we sell to retailers. That might be small square footprint coffee shops that have the niche. They're the niche who love your product and get the maximum. And as we go broader and the curve, the fit gets lower, as we get to the ends, some of these ends might be furniture stores like DFS, which are huge, 100,000, 1,000 square feet shops, appointment driven sales, not checkout, completely different business. They're still retail. And in somebody's pitch deck, they'd have put retail and the TAM would have included all of these people. But their product is a terrible fit for these guys and their product's a great fit for these people. So when we think about PMF that way, as a linear thing, recognizing that the market is linear and so is our strength of fit, and that we have a super narrow niche where we're really strong. What often happens is as soon as you start to scale and get more funding, you hire more salespeople, you hire more marketing. And those guys, they're paid to go and close deals, obviously, and get more reach. And naturally, it's very easy for those people to cast the net wider. And we end up starting to sell to where it's narrow, where the fit wasn't low. And as soon as we do that, we then end up trying, with people that aren't happy with the product, or we end up with feature requests coming in that are must-haves, but they're for all these different places across that bell curve. That's super unhelpful. I mean, we could invest and fix a bunch of problems, and all we're going to do is lift the bell curve very little bit across the board. We're not going to. What we really want to do is make them that peak. We want to make that wider at the very top. We want maximum product market fit for a bigger group. We don't want to just make our products slightly better for everyone. That's really not helpful if we want to actually make more money. Faster sales cycles and longer loyal customers who spend more money. We need more of the top. We need more of them at the peak. So the product momentum gap is where we've ended up accidentally acquiring and chasing a broader market that isn't really our PMF, and where we end up, and it was a lot of the pain points listeners and will hear and suffer, where churn is getting bigger, sales cycles are longer, products blamed by sales for deals not happening because we haven't been able to make some random feature quick enough, and all those things that happen so often. And then the hippo obviously comes in and wants to just direct that you build feature X because they can see the money for it and just want it. And they're under pressure because they're under pressure because the sales cycles are slower and the money's slower and they're missing their targets. And we end up in that perfect storm of, well, horribleness really and pain. To avoid that, we want to instead expand strategically and carefully and focus on how we make that top of that curve broader. And that means understanding where our niche really is, and then planning and discovering what niche is adjacent to it. It might be a very narrow niche, what's adjacent to it, and ensuring we have PMF for that, and then incrementally improving our PMF so that we making the bell curve broader rather than just lifting it everywhere. And that requires real high discipline on what your ICP is, what your ideal customer profile is. It requires clear alignment between sales and product. This is the people whose problem we're trying to solve. This is the target customer. And it requires real understanding from prioritization that when that tactical revenue comes in the door, i.e. we can make a big ton of cash short term with this client who's nowhere near your ICP. It requires the understanding and being able to articulate to the powers that be, to the people making the decisions, what the opportunity cost is if we chase that. And the product VCP described in the book helps with that. It helps you identify this opportunity is not on strategy. It's not going to help any of those behaviors we said we were chasing. We can do it, and it might be the right thing for the business to do it. They might help cash flow, and they might be struggling with cash and survival of the business. That's not a wrong decision, but we need to make those decisions knowingly and not by accident. And too often they're made just by accident. So having the VCP helps you go, this is a tactical decision. If we do it, we're going to miss all this opportunity that we agreed upon. We can do that, but let's all know what we're saying yes to before we throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that bell curve as a way to visualize product market fit as opposed to a check mark or a binary. And by the way, for the audience, if you have questions, get them in now rather than in the last flurry of minutes like usual. So jump into the Q&A section, get your questions in. But in the meantime, Dave, for companies who like established companies, this is where the problem really comes. Because if you're a new company, then quite clearly you say, this is what we're building for. We're just going to build these types of features. And you can know not to get yourself into the problem where you're building for everybody. But if you're an established company, a lot of these companies have had this problem where they've taken on a feature here, a feature there. I talk a lot about the agency trap, where companies start acting like agencies, as in they do custom work for clients as opposed to focus on doing discovery for that core center group that they should be doing. And it seems really good and easy at first because it's paying the bills and it's solving some problems for the short term, but it's not really building up towards their ultimate vision. And ultimately, it's not helping them hit product market fit for the right market. What does a company do when they have this smattering of features that sort of solve something for everyone? They're good for DFS, but they're also good for a mom and pop shop.
Yeah, there is a point, I think, and this isn't a nice answer, but there is a point where you've passed the point of no return and you're totally screwed. And what I mean by that is there is a stage where you've got, depending on the size of the company, where it's impossible for you to say no to some of the revenue anymore. And you've got revenue commitments that are high maintenance and cost as much to maintain, so much to maintain and look after and keep running. And they're spread across that broad spectrum that it's extremely hard to, and they're all custom. You can't just acquire another. You're not set. You've stopped being a SaaS business. You've started being an agency, like you say. And the definition, by the way, so everyone knows, you're a SaaS company when you write a line of code and sell it to lots of people. If you write a line of code for one person, you're no longer a SaaS company. That's my definition.
And it's not just code. It's actually worth pointing out that what you're building as a SaaS company is a service, right? It's software as a service. You're providing a service. And these customizations extend to your services. So we're talking custom terms of service as well. These are customizations just as much as your code are. So don't fall into that trap of having a custom terms of service for every client as well that comes by, because it's very tempting and they'll ask for it.
And customer service, your CS, your customer success team can't help all these people with all these different random requirements and needs. There is a point where if you've gone too far down the line, unraveling it, because you can't afford, if you haven't got enough capital to just go forward pick a direction and go for it. There is a point where you can't undo it. You've gotten too far down the line. And for a product person, it's important, I think, for product managers to recognize that some companies are no longer and incapable of being a product business. You're not a product company when you're at that point. And they really shouldn't be hiring product managers. They should just hire project managers and be honest about it.
And it's tough for the product manager who realizes that they're in a company that are called a product manager, but they're no longer a product manager, or they never were a product manager. I know this because I've been there. The first job that I got when I moved to London, I was hired as a product manager, and it took me about a week to get this spidey sense. And I was asking around and realized I'm actually a project manager, aren't I? I'm just doing implementations of our, let's admit it, crap platform for clients that our sales team has sold several months in advance.
That's it. And you'll know it if you're in that place. It's pretty obvious. So I think happily though, I think it's you've got to have gone down the line a long way before it's completely no return. But to fix it, it's about going back to where is our future business going to be? For an established business of this size, it's probably around the 3-4 million ARR mark. And the target is always, for some reason, we like round numbers. The target will always be 10. How do we get to 10 million? Or if you're a 15 million business, the target would be how do we get to 100? We seem to focus on factors of with an extra zero. But the question is going to be, in this example, where's the next 6 million come from? And that's the strategic challenge we've got. And the focus there is then making sure, as a product leader or product manager, that you're helping the business find and identify the core customer and the core problems you're going to solve that's going to get you that next 6 million, and bring it back down and refocus it. You'll still be serving these guys over here who are no interest long term. And if you get that right and start servicing that new market, it's an existing market, but if you really focus on that portion where you can deliver high value and start to get the PMF high for them, and then slowly expand the PMF out, those others over time will just fall away naturally. They'll organically run their course, and you won't really mind. I can think of companies where I've worked where we've had that exact challenge. Some decent money, some good couple of £1 million contracts, but we've just done the minimum to keep them alive because it made good sense. They were the cash cow, and it's pretty much celebrated when they eventually ran their life and left because they were no longer part of the bigger 100, 200 million vision. They were a sundry item by that point. So I think that's really the thing. It's about identifying, focusing on the future and where that growth is going to come from, and recognizing that it can't come from a broad market. The amount of founders and CPOs I work with who for some reason are obsessed with the market must be, we must have as many, it must be really big. And if you're going to try and solve this person's problem and this person's problem, that means your marketing spend is going to have to be double, because you're going to have one message for this guy and one message for this guy. So for every dollar you spend marketing to this guy, you're not spending a penny to market to this guy.
Yeah.
Your CS people have got to understand both. They're complete, and how they use the product is probably completely different. All your costs and operations get bigger. And the reality is one of those was probably worth one of those markets, one of those niches, and it might feel narrow and uncomfortable, but normally that narrow, uncomfortable niche is still worth hundreds of millions of potential dollars, more than enough to get you to your next target, rather than, oh, well, I must play in $1 trillion market. And when you're only really aiming to make 0.01% of that $1 trillion, just go after the niche, speak to people, solve somebody's problem brilliantly where they recognize you're their solution, and that you're going to get much quicker sales.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that. And David had asked a question, which I think he mostly answered there, which is how can we de-agency-ize? As in, how can we get out of the whole agency thing? You had some good points there around making a deliberate step away from the wrong types of business and towards that more narrow gap that is going to be reflective of the type of business that you need. I also wrote an article, and I've done some talks on this as well, called Escaping the Agency Trap. So I can send that round. I'll include that in the show notes, but include some tips around pricing differently for agency style work and product work while you're doing that transition, and just how to have those tough conversations. Sometimes your team doesn't even know that they're acting like an agency, and it just needs to be called out. You need to call bullshit on the way that your team is working and say, hey, you're going to tank this business if we keep running it this way. So what do we do? David has clarified. He said, my company is trying to grow our SaaS business using funds generated from customer software extensions, with hopes that we can generalize what we build for them, for everyone. But the team spends more time building those extensions than working on the core product, which honestly, this is the core problem that I see with teams. I've worked for that company too. There's always that hope that there's always that chance that one little thing that you're working on, you can sell to a client and then you're going to be able to resell to everybody. But the chance that you have magically outsourced your discovery work to your client and then you can just turn it into more money for other clients is actually really small. You have to do the discovery work yourself. And you need to figure out what your core thing is and not just take those orders from somebody else. Because chances are, if they're paying the bill, they're over here in the bell curve, right? They're not right here unless you've done that discovery work and you know that they're right there, at which point do the work, right? Because you know that they're in your core market. But if they're over here and they're paying for it, then you are taking yourself off track. And this over here is not going to help you get more people in the middle. So I think Dave's product momentum or product fit, market fit, bell curve model is a really good way of framing that.
I love all the advice, and I've seen you do that talk. I think I saw you do it at HubSpot's offices. So well worth watching if anyone picks up the link. But on a tactical side, to try and highlight this, David, to your, some of the operators and decision makers, a technique that seems to really help is starting to get a money value, cost value of a sprint. And I've done this with a lot of teams. It seems roughly on average in the UK, at least, a sprint costs 25 grand.
A sprint
roughly.
costs 25 grand. Okay, yeah, that checks out. We worked out something similar. A failed feature, a small feature, costs about 35 grand. So if you assume it's a sprint in a bit, we worked it out. Yeah. So probably in the same order of magnitude.
I mean, every company can work out what, on average, what does a team cost them.
Yeah.
And then start putting money values on some of these conversations. Quite often, some of this agency custom work, the problem is you're operating like a SaaS business, but you're doing the work like an agency. And the business model and the funding for a SaaS business is, I'm going to spend a lot of money up front to build this thing, but we'll sell it lots and lots of times.
Yeah.
A bit like making a movie. We'll spend millions of dollars making a movie. It hasn't made a penny until everybody starts watching it.
Yeah.
It's the same deal, really, just on smaller scale. And more, and we can do it incrementally, thankfully. They pay for the trailers in that analogy. But in the agency world, you're paying for one thing and you pay for that being delivered. But your accounting in the business, normally, in that example, isn't counting for the cost to deliver that revenue in that one-off mechanism, especially when you've convinced yourself, oh, we'll write it once and somehow generalize it for more, which never ever works, by the way. There's always going to be more cost to generalize it.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it won't be something you can generalize, but it's not going to come for free.
Speaking from experience, that is so true.
Yeah, it's always the case.
Or you just end up with lots of scope creep, and it was one thing and then it becomes this big thing. I've got some stories there.
Start putting a price on them. This thing we're doing for this client, actually, it's taking us 2 sprints. It's costing us 50 grand. How much was the contract? How much was the value? And the amount of times it's negative, the amount of times it's, well, we sold it for 10 grand. We didn't realize it was costing us 50 grand to make it.
Yeah.
That's a real quick way to start getting rid of some of this nonsense.
Yeah, absolutely. So Claudia asked a question here. She said she loved the part about the importance of working together with marketing and sales, but what happens when the sales team is much more senior than the product team and they have their own process with the product team they have their own process, which the product team doesn't have much luck affecting? How can we adjust or convince them to work together? And this one's a popular one because 2 people have given it a thumbs up here.
Oh, good question. When I coach product leaders, and that's what I do all day, I typically talk about the fact they need to spend 50% of their time focused on their team and 50% of the time focused with sales and CS. If as a product leader, always spent personally more of my time with the other teams than I did my own team, ironically. And that's because my job was to grease the wheels and make sure it would work. Part of my job to set them up for success is to ensure they're well received and able to work with the rest of the business. You know, if you are a VP or product, or you're the most senior product person, you need to be spending time with the most senior salesperson. And I don't care what the job title is, you're still the most senior product person. It doesn't matter if they see something and you're not. You still should spend time with them and talk to them and try and cut through the hierarchy. Obviously, you can't make the same decisions as they come, and you don't have the same power if they're higher up the hierarchy. But you've got to be able to build a rapport with them and build that empathy so you can start to empathize with them. At the end of the day, sales are focused on hitting their targets. They're short-term focused always, unlike product, who are often much more longer. We're often thinking about what we're building for next year. What we build now, often the income will be next year, not this year. So in some businesses, it's different for where we've got e-com, but you've got to help empathize with their short-term focus and help them recognize how they can win more. If you can help them win more, they're going to support you and support your ideas. If you're doing it just because it feels like the right thing to do for product, because you've read it in a book, even if it's mine, then don't do it. You've got to do it because it's the right thing to support the business. So find those winning things. And if you've got the other point, I think, is to recognize it doesn't matter about hierarchy, whether it's below, up, or sideways. Pretty much every conversation you're in as a product manager is a negotiation, literally every single time. You're really negotiating all day long. That's what you do. Because product, if you think about being CPO, you're the only C-suite member who cannot deliver anything they promise on their own. Anything you're accountable for, you literally can't do it without another department. You can't build anything, you can't release anything, you can't sell anything. It really doesn't, there's nothing you can do. None of the big things you can do without anyone else. Everyone else can. The CTO will still build something. It might be the wrong thing, but they'll still build stuff. Marketing can still market something. Everybody can do their thing on their own. You are the only one that can't. So your job is to negotiate with them all the time because you're pinching and borrowing their resources. You haven't influenced them. If you have a reflect on your negotiation skills and maybe spend some time working on that. Perhaps the best way to do that is to look up a guy called Chris Voss, who was the head of negotiation for the FBI. And he's written an amazing book called Never Split the Difference. He's got a bunch of YouTube videos that are really easy to watch if you're not a book reader. And start borrowing some of those tips and tactics that he has.
That's really good advice. Thank you for sharing that. Now, just conscious of time here, so we're going to wrap up, but I want to say a huge thank you, Dave, for jumping in, sharing your insights today. And thank you, everybody, for jumping in with your questions in your chat today. Thank you, everybody. We're signing off here, and we'll see you in the New Year's.